Cyberpunk 2077 was one of the most anticipated games of 2020, if not in modern gaming memory. Coming from CD Projekt Red, the same studio that brought us the highly acclaimed Witcher series of games, the gaming community was in a fever pitch to see what the Polish game developer could deliver in this new futuristic first-person RPG. Of course, we all know by now that Cyberpunk 2077 launched with a bang and quickly fizzled out. What could have been a genre-defining experience became victim to a plethora of glitches and a product that just could not live up to all that was promised. The game has seen many small patches since its release, and CD Projekt Red has been attempting damage control ever since. Future DLC plans were put on hold, next-generation ports were delayed, and the game was even removed from the PlayStation Digital Marketplace until the play experience could be rectified. Last week, CD Projekt Red released version 1.5 of Cyberpunk 2077, and with it comes the biggest changes to date. Along with more bug fixes are new items, new features, and the PS5 and Xbox Series XS versions that gamers have been patiently waiting over a year for. The game seems finally in a completed state. Now that the game is in much better form, with version 1.5 coming much closer to the developer's original vision for the game, I felt it was high time to give it a much more thorough playthrough. It's also time, I think, to shed light on whether or not Cyberpunk 2077 is now worthy of your attention. Cyberpunk 2077 is a video game adaptation of a popular pen and paper RPG created in 1988 by Mike Pondsmith and his company R. Talsorian Games. The franchise is set in an alternate future in which crime is rampant, corporations have more power than governments, and commercialism of everything, right down to the human body, is the law of the land. It draws inspiration from other dystopian sci-fi media franchises from the day, such as Blade Runner, Mad Max, Escape from New York, The Terminator, Tron, and so many others. All of these were commentaries on both the fear and fascination of technology, the Cold War, of capitalism, and all the things people encountered in their daily lives in the 1980s. By and large, these same conversations are still happening today. The fictional futures of these franchises have inched ever closer to reality. Self-driving cars, mega-corporations that have wealth beyond entire nations, a cyberspace that attempts to mimic every aspect of reality, and wars fought with keystrokes and disinformation rather than just guns and troop numbers. Cyberpunk is arguably more relevant today, as it was 30 years ago. I won't be going in depth into every aspect of the game. There are countless reviews, gameplay videos, and more discussing the fractured mess Cyberpunk 2077 was when it first released. Instead, I want to focus on how the new changes influence the game and what my experience is now, roughly 14 months after it hit store shelves. Right off the bat, I can say that Cyberpunk 2077 now runs exceptionally well, especially on next-gen hardware. When I first played the game on PS4, the game would struggle most of the time. Highly detailed areas made my console roar like a jet engine. Frame rate drops added additional difficulty to firefights, and the graphical glitches were just too many to name. It seemed that every single combat scenario had a glitch of some sort, be it an enemy clipping through their cover, corpses of downed foes floating in mid-air, or the AI getting so confused that they would start blasting away at a random wall. Now, these problems are few and far between. My PS5 is largely silent when playing, even when the action is at its most intense, and the frame rate remains buttery smooth. Clipping issues are nearly non-existent, which is impressive for the size and scale of this game. I still encounter the occasional floating body, especially if they die in an awkward position, but they are in no way commonplace. The AI has been greatly tweaked too. Enemies will now intelligently use cover instead of standing in the open, while melee foes will rush your position after waiting for an opening. Each of Night City's numerous gangs also have their own tailor-made behavior too, with some using more chaotic tactics, while others stay on the defensive. Civilians also have increased awareness. Used to, they would just stand around when the guns began to fire, but now they react accordingly. Most will flee in the opposite direction, while others will take cover, and some may even join in should they feel threatened enough. It's details like these that really make an open world game shine, as it crafts a much more believable and alive world to explore. I have still witnessed some major graphical problems in some places. Again, this isn't anywhere near the level it was upon release, but it does bear mentioning. The worst case was when I visited one of the many nightclubs. I noticed that the lights were extremely bright, so much so that it was immediately giving my eyes some strain. They would occasionally flicker on and off quickly, almost seizure-inducing. I took note that if I stopped moving, the lights just remained on, which felt really weird. Then I spotted a couple near a doorway, and their clothes had this really wild flashing effect. I thought this was all normal for the game, until I got closer and saw that their skin wasn't displaying properly. This, of course, prompted a reload, and all the issues I've just mentioned were rectified. It's in no way game-breaking, but issues like this do take you out of the experience and can sour the mood if they occur in the right spot. Now, fortunately, this was the only time I've encountered such a problem thus far in the game, but I really hope I don't again. The pacing of Cyberpunk 2077 has also been largely reworked thanks to the way missions are handed out. Most of the game's side quests are given by individuals called Fixers. Originally, after the initial story missions, all the missions for the local Fixer became available and were displayed on the map. When I first played, I tackled most of these before continuing on with the story, as that's just how I play my open world RPGs. The problem is, this kept me from diving into the game's intriguing story, and also delayed me gaining access to some awesome items and abilities. With the latest patch, only a handful of a Fixer's missions are accessed at a time. After completing all of those, your reputation with the Fixer will be high enough to get a few more, which then need to be finished before a new batch is awarded, and so on. It's a minor update, but it does feel more organic and pushes you to explore more of the game, do other tasks, and not just grind out a single area of the city until everything's completed. The skill system has also been revamped to be a lot more accessible and enjoyable. When the player gains a level, they are given a point to assign to one of 5 attributes, as well as a point to assign to a perk, which are abilities that are connected to these attributes. Suppose you want to craft a character that's an expert in guns. The attribute that you want to focus most on is reflex, and connected to that attribute are numerous skills that are only made available if your reflex attribute is at a high enough level. Now, the attribute system is unchanged with this latest patch, but every individual perk has been analyzed by the development team and tweaked in some way. Some perks have been renamed, moved to other trees, or completely redesigned to become more impactful or more balanced. For those that are currently in a playthrough when the 1.5 patch hit, when you first load back into your game, all of your perks will need to be reassigned. This might be a pain for people who were perfectly happy with how they had customized their character, but for many, it will be a welcome option to better outfit their character the best way possible. Speaking of character customization, when the game released originally, there was no way to edit the protagonist's physical appearance. You could change your clothes for sure, but no way to change hairstyles, add scars, or readjust a nose that just didn't look right. This was absurd, considering that a major theme of the game's world is the customization of oneself. This is a world where nearly everyone has had enhancement surgery in one way or another, be it a mechanical arm or a robotic eye, so this being absent really felt awful. Now, players can easily change their appearance by simply visiting their apartment and looking into the mirror. That's it. Did we really need to wait this long for such an option to be added to the game? Well, at least they've added several new hairstyles and other features to help make character customization even more exciting. And while we're on the topic of apartments, there are now more places to buy and claim as your headquarters, spread all across Night City. There's not much you can do here, considering you can access your storage from any of your own vehicles, and you can save at any time, anywhere, but it's nice to have a hideaway in each of the game's districts. You can even customize them to a small degree should you like. The developers mentioned this as a feature that would be included in the game at launch, so it was baffling when no such feature was present when it originally hit store shelves. At least now we are getting it, and it brings Cyberpunk 2077 a little closer to that original promise. Prior to the patch, entering a car would put you into a third-person camera perspective, letting you see your car and all of your surroundings. Now this is nice for the most part, but it always seemed to break immersion considering the rest of the game is played entirely in the first person. I've always preferred to play driving in a third-person mode when given the option in the game, as it's always easier to avoid obstacles and see what's going on, but not having the ability to drive behind the wheel felt like a massive oversight in the original game. That's been fixed with version 1.5. Now players can enjoy the beautifully detailed interiors of the vehicles they drive and cruise the streets of Night City in a full first-person view. The PS5 DualSense controller also aids in making driving feel much more realistic. The adaptive triggers simulate the gears shifting around and the tires gripping the road when braking or drifting. The improved rumble technology also makes crashes feel much more impactful. While a nuanced addition, these changes still make a considerable impact on how much better the game feels now on next-gen hardware. There are a few other little adjustments that are worth noting. The knife throwing perk now allows knives to return to you like a boomerang, so the perk no longer feels useless. Rain also appears much more realistic, running more naturally down windshields, and pedestrians will even use umbrellas when it's pouring outside. Also, there's a new wait function, which you can use to automatically pass the time in case this is needed for a quest, or if you just want to see the city at a certain time of the day. Even with all the improvements made with version 1.5, Cyberpunk 2077 isn't perfect. There's still a decent amount of glitches, although the vast majority of the most hazardous bugs have been long squished. The world is expertly detailed too, but can still feel somewhat empty considering the scarcity of vehicles and pedestrians in some areas. It's also still missing a good deal of things that feel like they should be there, such as interactive mini-games or the ability to preview clothes without having to actually equip them. Yet the game manages to be much more fun with this new patch. It feels polished, no longer just rushed and shoved out the door to make a deadline. The existing bugs are at a forgivable rate, and careful attention has been made to make the world feel much more alive. Had this been how Cyberpunk 2077 released in December of 2020, I dare say it would have been a Game of the Year contender. I don't think it would have won, mind you, but its size and scope and genuinely fun gameplay are something that deserves to be experienced. If you have been putting this game off or had a bitter experience playing it the first go around, then I say now is the time to visit Night City. I think that you just might enjoy your stay.